Welcome back to the Godly Young Men Podcast. This is episode 36. Thank you very much for joining us either on YouTube or on your podcast app. Got a really good discussion today. For those of you who are watching on YouTube, I am wearing this Vols shirt in honor of, we're recording this on the day that college football week 1 has started, and last I checked, the Vols were up 21-3, I think.
28-3 is what I just saw.
Even better. Yep, even better. So we are here celebrating today. Go Vols. Go college football.
And CU's making it. Hey, they're
Joe
making it look
all
good.
of a sudden cares about Colorado University. I don't think I ever heard him mention them before this year.
Well, hey, I used to. I've been to a few games, but when you're 1-11, there's nothing to cheer for. So
and then you get Dion. No wonder.
Then you get Dion prime time.
Yep.
So yeah, looking good. We'll see. As of right now, when we're recording, I don't know who won. So I'm not going to say anything lest I
they were looking good.
They're looking good. They're looking all right.
Comment your preferred college football team.
Yes.
If you say Alabama, you're getting blocked. No,
Yeah,
just
that's right.
Just kidding. We accept any
We don't
and all.
want you as a fan.
Any and all people watching this, even people who are poorly misguided.
That's
being
right.
Alabama fans.
That's right.
All right, we got a big episode to get to, so let's roll into it. Joe, I'm going to hand it to you. We're talking about mental health. We're talking about young men, specifically mental health. And I think if we had this episode 30 years ago, obviously YouTube didn't exist, but let's say we did, nobody would care. Like, it would not get a lot of run. People would be like, well, that's a boring topic of conversation and move on, because it wasn't in the public consciousness. Kind of is now. Get us into how kind of it's been on the rise, because again, if we'd had this episode a couple decades ago, nobody would care.
Well, it is really interesting. Like, you look back 70s, 80s, 90s, like it's very much come into, I don't know, Disney Channel, like they've started to help orchestrate the rise of mental health being a thing, but you can trace it through music, actually. And you see like the punk era, the Ramones or whatever, like this punk era, and maybe even before that, I don't know if you can, like, this isn't musical, but the sexual revolution, you see all of these times in history where these kids are kind of rising up. I would say that's punk rock. I would say that's grunge, Smells Like Teen Spirit from Nirvana, right? Get into My Chemical Romance. And so those were like movements, Linkin Park and such, for rallying cries for young kids. You didn't have 50-year-olds listening to that stuff. It was a young kid movement, a way for them to show pain, a way for them to get out the mental health, and you can track that through. But you could also see all the adults are basically like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
This is stupid music. This is ridiculous. You guys have no reason to complain. And so it was pretty much like mental health was forgotten or really blown off from anybody that was of age, so to speak.
Well, think about even now how it is more in the public consciousness with the music. Some of the most popular artists in the world, 21 Pilots, blew up. You know, and that's a lot of what they you were a fan of them before it was hip, right?
And that's exactly it. Right when they dropped
was.
Vessel, I think within a month or two of them dropping Vessel, I got into it. And so I feel cool about it, but looking back on it, it's like, they're huge exploded.
Now. Yeah, you got Juice WRLD and Mac Miller, of course, who overdosed, unfortunately. But, talked a lot about mental health in there. I guess sang about mental health in their music. You got Logic with the Suicide song. That one exploded. Alessia Cara, I think, was on that song as well.
Another Demi Lovato, I think.
NF also.
That's
NF is insanely popular.
Yes.
And he does a lot of that stuff in his music. And then even to some extent, Post Malone in his newest album.
That's true.
You see it a lot is the point. Like, and we're not endorsing any of these artists or anything like that. We're bringing them up as a point to say mental health is in the public consciousness a whole lot more, and it's reflected in young people's music of the day. A lot of young people listen to Post Malone. A lot of them listen to NF. A lot of them listen to 21 Pilots, Juice WRLD, all these people. So people know about it a whole lot more.
It's kind of in the term is zeitgeist, right? Like like you said, public consciousness. The problem is there's a lot of bad advice in some of these songs. Some are just singing about their own struggles with mental health, but imagine you're following Juice WRLD, you're getting into his lyrics. I don't listen to him. I don't know hardly any of his songs. But you're watching this, and then he overdoses. And what message is that sending to young kids? And you're seeing these on TikTok, all these trends and whatnot, and the challenges and everything that goes around to try to, like, help mental health, quote unquote, but there's so much bad advice out there. Just not even TikTok, we pick on that a lot, but social media in general. You look at the schools, the way the schools handle mental health, like there's just a lot of misguided information out there.
Yeah, and what we want to do with this episode is talk about what is true about mental health. Because like you said, there are some myths out there. There is bad advice. There are people and there are points that you don't want to listen to when it comes to mental health. We're going to try to give some things that we think you obviously should listen to and you should always consider when talking about mental health. Let's start with the obvious, and this is the first one you got on here. Mental health is very real. Mm-hmm. I'll be honest. It's something that 4 or 5 years ago for me, I'm about to describe what a lot of people view mental health as, and I kind of used to view it that way too. Sure. Like kind of the get over it, like just push through. Right. Don't be a wimp. That kind of mindset. And a lot of guys have that mindset. Masculinity gurus push that idea as well. Again, just kind of man, get over it. Like, just push through it.
Depression is an illusion.
Yeah, yeah. Andrew Tate says depression, he doesn't believe in it, and that kind of thing, at least clinical depression. And so we don't subscribe to that. Mental health certainly is real.
Right.
I think it's overblown, and I think people, use it as an excuse a lot, which we'll get into it later, so I'll save my spiel there. But starting with the obvious truth, it is real.
Yeah, absolutely. The one you didn't mention that I think I had on there is just that crying is for wimps or for losers or for wusses or whatever. That's not true.
Tough
but
men don't cry. Yeah,
right, but that's been pushed for decades. Now we're getting out of it. Like you said, we're going to get into we take it from both sides here.
Yep.
But first things first, it is real. It's not as common to hear that it's not real these days. Of course, you can see on TikTok all of the mental health professionals and mental health gurus and whatnot that are bringing it into the public consciousness and the stigma hashtag. Come on. Like, there is very, very little stigma compared to what there was. I'm a therapist, so when I see that, it's like you would think that I'd be right on board. Yeah, end the stigma. To a certain extent, maybe among the older generation.
I think the difference is you look at people who actually are struggling with mental health. They're not posting on social media.
Correct.
Hashtag in the stigma.
Correct.
Again, we will get to. I'm piggybacking on the next point. But
I was going to say we're so jonesing to get to that point.
You work with people who actually do have legitimate mental
very
health
much
struggles.
So.
Yeah.
Very much so. Just truly clinical issues in the DSM, things like that. But you do hear from a lot of people that mental health is real, so we don't want to beat this point to death. We don't want to spend the majority of our outline on this because you're not going to hear it.
I do want to ask you, though, real quick,
Sure.
and this is not on the outline. I'm throwing you for a loop here, but this is your line of work, so I'm sure you're going to be more than adequately equipped for it. Talking about mental health specifically for guys, godly young men. Let's say, some guys watching this going, okay, what do young guys struggle with mental health wise? What are some of the things that cause young men to have legitimate mental health issues? Again, not the stuff we'll get to later that's kind of fake and not made up, but used as an excuse, but actual legit mental health. What do young guys struggle with mental health wise? What causes it, I guess?
Yeah, well, we'll get into what they struggle with, what causes it. We're probably not going to get into much because you're going to need individual therapy. Attachment issues, poor relationship with the parents, really bad relationships. Trauma can cause a lot of those things, and circumstantial bullying can cause a lot of that. Moving multiple times, if your family is a military family, you move 4 or 5 times, that can be traumatic because you're making friends and stopping. Yeah, exactly. So those things can cause it. Things like car wrecks, things like anything that happens that the average person maybe doesn't deal with, that you're isolated from, that causes a lot of the issues that we're seeing. Bullying causes a lot because and you see this a lot, unfortunately, in public school, is a hierarchy difference. So you're either top of the food chain or you're kind of the bottom of the food chain, and you're working your way up by putting other people below you. And so it's just really, really toxic is the term. But those are the type of things that I would say cause it. We may not get into some of those. If you do have genuine trauma, and let me define trauma really fast since we're talking about it, and I may have done this in a previous episode. Trauma is really any event that causes negative emotional impact.
Yeah.
So we look at it, well, I wasn't physically abused, I wasn't sexually abused, or whatever it is. I wasn't in a war, so I don't have trauma. That's not true. I've worked with people who have moved 4 or 5 times. That's traumatic for a kid. I've worked with people whose dad just never really gave him praise, never hugged them. I get that a lot. Like, the dad never hugged them. That's traumatic to a kid. So trauma is just anything that really leaves a negative emotional impact, lasting emotional impact. And if you have some of those things, that may be contributing to what we're going to talk about.
Well, and what's scary is you got this on here, and I know you want to talk about it, how much of it you can get from your parents. Yeah. How much of a role, and that's honestly is one of the scariest things about being a parent.
No kidding.
As I have a 2-year-old, almost 2-year-old right now, honestly, it does go through the back of my head so many times, like how badly you can mess up a kid by just not being a good dad, by not being a good mom, even by not being a good parent, by neglecting, by doing the timeout thing where you just stick them in a room by themselves. Where I don't know. There's just a lot to think about as I consider. There's a lot of messed up people, and it stems from a lot of people had messed up parents.
This is the struggle. Man, I could go off on parenting for a long time because I feel really bad as a parent myself, seeing my parents, your parents. I mean, I work with it a lot. I feel really bad for parents on the one hand because you could do something the exact opposite and both could be traumatic to the kid. So for instance, kids getting bullied in school. You go in and take care of it for them. That's traumatic because you didn't believe in the kid. You didn't think that the kid was strong enough to take care of it themselves. Now they're getting bullied for you going and taking care of it. If you don't do anything about it, then you neglected them.
Yep.
You weren't
it's
there
a lose-lose.
It's a lose-lose. You know what I mean? So for a lot of parents, that is the case. What I don't like is, well, I just did the best I could. No, you didn't. Like
Yeah.
a lot of times parents didn't. And so from the parental, this isn't on the outline, but it's such an interesting discussion. The biggest thing is we can over forgive our parents. We can forgive our parents too soon. And I'm a big proponent of this. I actually think I spoke about it in my Get Out of Porn podcast. We can forgive our parents too soon, and that can be traumatic too, because it's like, well, everybody's got their problems. My parents had their traumas. From an from a inner child perspective, that's a problem, because your inner child really was wounded by your parents. And so you're siding with your parents and not your inner child, and it creates all sorts of internal struggles, which is really what comes out here. We're going to discuss this in an upcoming episode, the self-esteem and why the relationship with the self is really at the core of self-esteem.
Sure.
And what takes a baseball bat to your relationship with yourself. We'll bring up some more of those things. But it is a fascinating discussion. I could talk about those things all day long, as far as it goes with parents. But as far as it goes with this, we're going to come back to the point that we really want to hit, and what we think is the biggest struggle in the culture, personally. Mental health being real and recognizing that it's real is not the biggest struggle, but it is important for us to do. But then you say, okay, well, what is mental health?
Right.
And we have to understand what mental health is. I define it, and I got this from somebody else. This was not from me. A woman at church gave it to me. I think I may have mentioned it here. Mental health is a person's alignment with reality. And I thought,
Basically, like how close they are to being in line with reality.
So, like, let's say reality is perfectly down the center. You may be way left, you may be way right. Those who are schizophrenic, who are like hallucinating things, they may be way left or right. They're not even close, right? They're like hallucinating things that aren't real.
Right.
But you also could say everybody hates me. That's not reality either. So that could be part of negative, mental health and such. So, person's alignment. Well, God's at the core. Who creates reality? God.
Yeah.
So a person's connectedness with God absolutely plays a part, but it's also attempting to see things the way they really are, which is yourself. That's self-awareness. We want to be self-aware. The people that aren't, man, their mental health is terrible because they don't see themselves as themselves, right? They have no self-awareness or how other people view them, their awareness of others, other people's motives. Well, they just did that because of that reason. That's not true. They did it because they were hurting. They did it because of whatever else. That's part of mental health. And then just awareness of how the world works around you. You can have those that bury their head in the sand. That does not help with mental health. That's really gonna kind of kick us off into the next one, because that's where you see a lot of the LGBTQ is they don't understand the way of the world. They really don't have the relationship with God to define reality. They are trying to bend reality to their point, and that's a problem.
Yeah. Yeah, the alignment with reality point that you brought up before is always a way I've never heard it before either until you whoever you got it from. So I think it's super interesting. Let's go ahead because we're 15 minutes in. Let's go ahead and get to point number 2. Unless you had anything else you wanted to add on that. So again, point number 1, mental health is very real. We are not sitting up here saying it's all fake, it's all a hoax. Just certainly not with being a therapist. Like there are very legitimate cases of mental health. However, and let's get to point number 2.
Sure.
Mental health struggles must not and cannot define you. This is where the truly bad advice from the culture has wrecked a lot of people. Has ruined a lot of people. It has almost become cool to be mentally unhealthy. Like that's a badge of honor.
Yeah.
If you are, if you struggle with mental health. You remember, and I bring this up every time because it always where my mind goes. In the Olympics in 2020, Tokyo Olympics, Simone Biles, one of probably the greatest gymnasts ever. Like she's
just won her 8th world championship.
She was amazing. She quit. Like no other way to put it. She backed out.
Mid-Olympics.
In the middle of the Olympics, she quit, and the reason is because she cited mental health.
Yeah.
Okay, I got no beef with that. I can't imagine the pressure in the Olympics. I can't imagine having the whole world watching you, expecting you to get first every single time. Can't imagine it. She stepped back because of mental health. Okay. My big problem with it, and I imagine yours as well, the way the media glorified her,
so celebrated,
and put her up on this pedestal of what a hero, how brave it is that she cited mental health. Nobody even cared who won first or second because it was all about how brave Simone Biles was for citing mental health as the reason. And like, I'm sorry, like we didn't need to necessarily tear her down and say that she's really bad or anything like that. But man, don't act like she won the gold medal of life for quitting.
Exactly it. Don't act like she didn't just hurt her team majorly by backing down.
But what was so frustrating about it is immediately she leaned into it. I followed her on Twitter and I saw her retweet all these people that were like, if you're retweeting people who are talking good about you, that's not a good trait. Like don't do that.
Don't do that.
But yeah, it was so bothersome and frustrating how everybody was talking about how amazing she was and brave she was. Like, I'm sorry, she quit. Like that's the glorification and the people who wear it as a badge of honor that I'm talking about.
Well, here's the issue: is it becomes their identity. You see this in like 21 Pilots. I'm a fan of 21 Pilots. I like their music, but my problem with Tyler Joseph, their lead singer. Granted, I'm sure they're going to have a new album coming out at some point, maybe next year or something. We'll see where he's at in that. But it seems like every album there is the same struggles with mental health. His identity is in being the mental health struggle guy.
Yeah,
so
that's a great way to put
what reason does he have to overcome that? He's making millions of dollars on the back of struggling mentally. I'm not saying everybody is, I hate the phrase average Joe for my obvious, for obvious reasons.
Average Joe.
But for the average Joe out there, no, he's not making millions of dollars, but it's just as tempting to define yourself by mental health, especially if you're posting on Instagram about, going to therapy or whatever it is.
I'm going to say real quick, not to cut you off, if you have a legitimate struggle with mental health, delete all social media right now. That is the most frustrating thing to me.
Fantastic advice.
People talk about how bad their mental health is and how much the struggle is, and they're posting on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter. And that's where they go to tell everybody how mentally unhealthy they are.
That's right.
And they never stop to think about the fact maybe the reason you're mentally unhealthy is because what's the only reason people post that on social media?
To see what others think.
Well, and so other people will say, you've got it,
That's
you're
right.
awesome, what a
To get
hero,
that,
like
yeah.
Simone Biles did. That's why people do it. They post it on social media to get that gratification.
That
and
emotional bump, validation.
that affirmation from
Yep.
people that live states away from them on Facebook. It's so maddening. And so again, that's the one rant and soapbox I want to get on for this point. If you think you legitimately have a mental health struggle, delete your social media. I have no qualms saying that because I think that is a breeding ground for low self-esteem, for bad mental health. And so if you're already struggling with it, man, get off all that stuff.
That's right. Don't be posting about it. We could rant on this specific, mental health not defining you, this specific point for days because it frustrates me so much. The goal is to get healthy. The goal is to get better, not to
you got a
wallow
broken
in it.
leg. You don't want to be Chris Pratt on Parks and Rec and just keep your cast on so that you get everything handed to you. Your goal is to get out of the cast.
Yeah, exactly. But how many people have the mental cast on and they're continuing in it because that's their identity now?
Right.
Is I've struggled with it, and now this is the hashtag and the stigma. The people that post that are allowing this to define them. They're allowing their mental health struggles to be a part of their identity. And yeah, they would say they're looking to get better, but if you were really looking to get better, you would do it quietly, away from, like your point, away from social media, away from other people, and you would get to the bottom of it. And I'm not one of those that keeps you in therapy for life. I just don't believe in that. Your goal is to get better, to get healthy. I give you the tools to help yourself, and you move on from there. Do not allow your mental health struggles to define you that. I cannot scream that loudly enough. We're both going off of it, off on this because it is so frustrating to see the way the culture is these days that social media is taken up from all of the people that are bowing down to those who have mental health struggles. That's not what's going to get them out of mental health struggles. What that will do is it does validate them and it causes them to turn toward others for their mental health.
Yeah.
Which means you're giving them you're giving them all the power in the world. If they affirm me, I have better mental health. If they don't affirm me, I have poor mental health. What does that mean? Your mental health is predicated upon everybody else, not on you. That's a major problem. That's a
great way to put it.
Define yourself. This is the last point we'll move on. Define yourself as the guy working to be better mentally, emotionally, physically, and of course spiritually. We want to be better in those areas. Don't define yourself with your struggles.
To go back to it, you're not going to get better at those things by getting on social media and posting about how much you're struggling with mental health and how great your therapy session was and all this stuff. There are so many people like that. That's their go-to. It's how about you work on yourself? How about you go exercise? Go work out. Specifically for guys.
Hit the gym, man.
Yes.
That's a big one.
Yes, go do things. Go achieve. Go accomplish. Go actually try things rather than just posting about how mentally unhealthy. You know what I mean? It's for guys especially, man. It is so, and I know women can get into it too, but for guys especially, that cannot be your go-to. That cannot be your outlet to vent about how mentally unhealthy you are.
Right. It's not helpful because this gets us into our third point. So first, mental health is very real. We're not denying that in the least. Mental health struggles cannot define you though. That's number two. Number three, we want to get into two major. We're going to have more podcasts on other things that we think are relevant, but
these two could very easily affect people watching and listening to this.
Very much so.
Yeah.
Very much so. First is depression. And depression, I think, is rooted in loneliness, and I've heard it said for guys, and I agree with this for the most part. There's some exceptions, but for guys, depression's rooted in learned helplessness. And this is to your point, is I just can't do it. I need everybody else to affirm me. What am I supposed to do? They don't know what they're supposed to do. It's learned helplessness. They're allowing themselves to be helpless.
Yeah.
They're making their identity helplessness, and then they're wondering why they're depressed. The guy who gets up and goes to the gym and works on himself is getting out of learned helplessness. But I often say depression's rooted in loneliness. It's kind of difficult to quantify because that sounds like the girl side of it. Look, it's not good for man to be alone. Genesis 2:18.
Yeah.
First thing in the Bible that's not good. It's not good for man to be alone. So when we feel we can't be close to others, we can't be honest with others, we can't be open, we've got this secret struggle, whatever it is. That's why you see a lot of porn addicts who are depressed. Nobody knows me. Nobody knows me. And when nobody knows me, I can't be myself. Because if I was myself, they'd reject me, right? That's a depressing thought, ultimately. What am I supposed to do in life when everybody's going to reject me if they found the real me? So depression's very normal. We have to normalize it first, I guess, is just to say, like, I've been depressed, recently been depressed. Like, it happens, but you also come out of it. It's something, it's transient, so to speak. Like, it doesn't stick around.
So let me ask this, because, and again, I'm by no means the expert. Again, this is me sitting across the table from the expert, pretending like I know stuff. I don't know near as much about this stuff. But my two thoughts on this. One, I think a lot of young guys can have just a bad day. Man, I'm depressed. No, you had a bad day. Like, right. That's not what we're talking about with depression. The other question I had is, we hit so hard on this podcast, strive for greatness, achieve things, chase things. I imagine it would be a whole lot easier to be depressed and to find yourself depressed if you don't have things that you're striving for, right? Maybe you got a dead-end job. Yep. Maybe your marriage is in shambles. Maybe... again, you just got nothing you're working towards. What keeps me going, I'll speak for myself a lot of times, and because depression has never really been something that I struggle with, it's because, man, I've got things I'm working for. I got things that I've got goals in mind. I got things to reach for. I've got, and I think every guy should have that as my point. I guess what I'm asking from your perspective, do you think for most guys, if they look around and they don't have anything that they're chasing, striving for, wanting to achieve, then it's going to be way easier for them to be depressed?
I certainly think that contributes, no doubt. You have to have something that you're looking forward to, but not just looking forward to future-wise, something that you can actively control today. That's going to get us into anxiety.
Speaks to the gym point and stuff.
It speaks to the gym point. It speaks to, but the other guys that you see in this, you have some guys that go out on their own. They're doing great things, but they can still get depressed. I'll tell you who you don't see depressed as much as guys who are in a really good accountability group, really good groups that pushes them to strive for greatness, but that also encourages them, that builds them up, that says, man, that's fantastic, but they'll also pick them up when they're down, right? That really keeps somebody grounded, which goes to my point of loneliness, but it's also they're striving together for something collectively greater. I think that is one of the key ways to get out of depression or to keep yourself from being depressed is, as you said, strive for greatness and don't do it alone.
Find community. Yeah.
Right. Find community in striving for greatness, people that are really going to push you, but also, again, encourage you, because we do have lulls. David, the psalmist, I mean, you can tell there's serious mental health struggles there. Like, he's depressed. But he also knows, from a spiritual perspective, what does David do? God, you've always been good to me. Yeah. You've always taken care of me. You've taken care of my forefathers. I don't feel you in the moment. Matter of fact, I feel like you've forsaken me in this moment, but I'm going to look to the past and let it illuminate my future and say, God, you've been good in the past. I don't see it today, but I know you will be good with me in the future. And so that's really what helps us through, is gaining perspective in those moments, I would say.
To the community point, and then you can wrap us up and move on. Because, man, our goal is 5 more minutes. Let's wrap this episode in 5 more minutes. What I was going to say was, as you're talking about the community point, that is one of the reasons we started this podcast, in the sense that, look, we know a lot of people that listen to and watch this don't know us personally. You don't have our phone numbers, type of thing. Like, we're not super close. But one of the points of this was, so you as a young man, as a godly young man, if you do have these struggles, you can look around and say, there are people out there that are actively striving for this. There are people out there that understand my struggle. And so, again, it's not a sense of community in the sense of what Joe's talking about, of like, actually find people close to you, actually find friends, actually find mentors and people that you can talk to on a daily basis. But that is one of the reasons we wanted to start this podcast, is for young guys to say, this is the group of people that I want to be like. This is the group of people that I want to surround myself with, as opposed to the video game bug men that exist all around the world. You know what I mean? That's what I wanted to say there.
And let me also say this on that point. There's the temptation that you get the celebrities that are on TikTok or Instagram going, I care about you. And they're like, oh, they care about me. No, they don't.
No, they don't.
No, they don't. Okay. When we're talking about the community, I have my online buddies. Wrong. No, that's don't do that. Go find real people. Yeah. Shake their hand, look them in the eye, real relationship. We could get into like the physical pheromones and things like that people put off and such. There is an element of being closer to people when you're actually in person with them. So do not think that online community counts the same as in person. I know that may be all you have for right now, but strive to be around others, like physically. Here's what I'll say. Another brief word on depression. We're going to move on. There are types of depression, because everybody asks me about medication. Should I go on medication? What do you think of this medication? What do you think of anti-anxiety, antidepressants? I'm going to be honest with you. I hate them. I don't think they're helpful. I think 95% of the time they're Band-Aids. I'm not your doctor. You bring that up to your doctor, he's going to come after me and sue me. Please don't. But my point is, I think they're Band-Aids because they're often speaking to a different problem. There's 3 types of depression that I classify them as. There's circumstantial, there's historical, and there's chemical. There you go. Chemical is what it's actually good for. That's not most people. Yeah. Medication, balance-wise, you may have a small imbalance, but it could be from circumstantial, as you talked about. I'm just having a bad day. I'm having a bad week or a bad month.
Stressed out money
I'm
or
stressed.
Something, yeah.
My friend just moved away. I'm just feeling depressed. I'm feeling really down. Look, guys, that happens. Like, that really, really happens. You're stressed. Everything, the weight of life is hitting you. That's circumstantial.
And as a guy trying to provide for your family, that's going to be most likely the ones that hit you.
Oh, yeah. And sometimes you feel alone in that, and that's tough. Historical is, man, I've been doing this since I was 15 years old, I've been depressed. Okay, now we need to go do some trauma work. Like, what happened at 15? Maybe that's when your dad died, or maybe that's when major abuse happened, or whatever it is. Just be aware of that. So here's some coping, then we'll move on. We may have to save the other one.
3 minutes.
I was going to say, we're going to have to move on, or save the other one. Coping-wise, reach out to people. We've been talking about that. Second, maintain good habits. Like, go through the motions.
This is an important one.
Your future self will thank you for this. Man, I just don't want to get out of bed today. I don't want to make my bed today. I don't want to go to work today. We know. I've been there, man. I've been there. Like, I don't want to do those things, but I also know future Joe is depending on me today to get it done. And the more I go through this, the more I get to the other side, and future Joe looks back and goes, thank you. Tips his cap to me and goes, thank you for doing
the tough tasks, for actually sticking to stuff.
Even though you're depressed, even though you didn't want to, even though you're convincing yourself why it's not good, you know these habits are good. Continue through it. The last thing I'll say is find the root of the depression. You need to know where it's coming from. Is it circumstantial? Can we grieve that? Can we just feel the emotions and allow that? Can we talk to people about it? Or is there major trauma or abuse or something that you need to work through? Do that. If it's truly chemical and you're all over the place, maybe go find a doctor, that can help you with it. But that's what I would say coping-wise. There's other coping techniques we get into, but that's what I'll say.
Can we hit anxiety in like 4 minutes? If so, let's roll.
Let's do it in 4.
Let's do it in
4. Okay. I'm talking a lot. So
anxiety. No, you're good. Anxiety is the other one that a lot of young guys.
Yes, depression and anxiety.
Depression, anxiety, the top 2. Go for it.
So depression's rooted in loneliness. Anxiety's rooted in a lack of control, is what I found. We also have to normalize this. This is very normal. I've been anxious. You've been anxious. There is a difference between stress and anxiety. I would say stress is a little more circumstantial. I'm stressed about that test. Anxiety is like the world's crashing. The world's coming to an end. I'm going to die. I'm physically unsafe. You have a nervous system response. We could get into that as well, sympathetic, parasympathetic. But the anxiety is a very real thing, especially for teenagers. Everything's hitting you. Think about your teenage years and what all is going on there. You're coming into sexuality. You're coming into your own. You're starting to gain your own perspective on the world, not just your parents.
You want to be independent.
You want to be independent. You got bullies at school. You got a lot of things going on. This is very normal. So yeah, I guess any points you'd add? I know we're trying to wrap this up.
No, you're good. I mean, that's something like you said as you're a teenager and you get all these things that you're wanting to do, you're probably butting heads with your parents a little bit. Mm-hmm. You're trying to think about your future. That can be very stress inducing. Right. Of like, man, what do I want to be when I grow up? Where am I going to college? Should I go into trade school?
I've had clients come to see me just for that. I'm going out of high school and I don't know what I'm doing next, and I am a wreck. I can't sleep at night.
Even me, and I never use the word anxiety, but man, I was 15 and my mom asked, I had to pick my major at 15 because I was taking advanced classes and we kind of needed to know that, so I didn't take useless classes. And I was like, I'm 15. I don't know what degree I want to, what major I want to have.
Set the rest.
And so stuff like that, where it's like your future staring you in the face, and there's a sense of urgency that's like, man, let me be 15, let me be 16, And I do think you don't need to just revel in your youthfulness. But to wrap that point up, I think the I guess force of the future hitting you in the face when you're 16, 17, that can be very anxiety inducing.
I said this. I'll try to keep it short. I said this in Bible class the other night. I feel like almost life is a diamond shape. Something I've been thinking about it recently. And like, you go out and you have all of the opportunity in the world, right? You could catch everything because it's just you're opening. Yeah. And the more life you live, the more you open to it. And somewhere around maybe college is where you start to say, this is what I want. And for you, it hits you at 15. Yeah. I've got to decide what I want to do for the rest of my life. And you start kind of edging around. And for those that aren't watching, I'm making a diamond shape.
That's why you got to watch on YouTube.
Yeah, exactly. There you go. And you start to like come to a point. Your life has a purpose, has a point. There's a lot of anxiety going from constantly being out and having endless opportunity. I could marry anybody. I could do anything with my life. I mean, it's endless opportunity.
I got to pick a job. I got to pick a career.
Exactly.
And I got to pick a wife.
At some point, you have to do this. Well, guess when that's hitting? Godly young men time, right? 15 to 25 years old. That's really difficult to do. And you could prolong it till you're 30, 35. This is what people that haven't picked a career, haven't gotten married, haven't settled down. They're just chasing the endless fun. They find themselves so far spread out that it's like, it's shallow.
Yep.
I went out this way instead of figuring out my life has a point. A lot of anxiety in that. So what do we do about it? Here's some coping. Coping is a Band-Aid. Let me just say this. Coping is a Band-Aid. It does not solve the problem. If you're bleeding out, you have to put the Band-Aid on there. You've got to put some pressure.
Yeah.
But no, we would be joking or kidding ourselves if we thought that, you just keep pressure on there for 30 years. Like, you got to sew it up. You got to do some work. Coping, though. Find the root. Same thing. Find the root of the anxiety. Is this something that's been going on for a long time? Is this recent? Make a list of things you can control. It's rooted in control. Man, what if this happens? What if you know what? You may be nervous about that upcoming test. What can you control about it?
How much you study.
How much you study.
Yep.
Exactly. The sleep you get the night before. Things like that. Find the things you can control. Make a list of that. Literally write it down. Work on breathing techniques. This may sound stupid, but the more oxygen you get to the brain, the clearer you think. So, in through the nose, out through the mouth. Work on slow breathing. There's all sorts. Look up breathing techniques: butterfly breathing, infinity breathing, square breathing, 4-4-4. I mean, there's all sorts.
I've never heard of any of those. I need to look all those up.
Yeah.
I've never heard of any of those.
Go through all of them. There's a bazillion out there. And grounding techniques. Anxiety's kind of in the clouds, like this cloud follows you around, like Charlie Brown, and it could hit you at any time. All these raindrops falling. You need to take what's in the clouds and pull it down into, you know what? I'm safe now. Mm-hmm. Well, what if this happens? What if that happens? I'm not going to future trip about it. I'm safe where I am. And grounding technique is really just pushing into the floor, pushing your butt into the chair, and kind of doing this and reminding yourself, I'm safe where I am. It's a great technique to use. It may seem childish, but it actually does work, called 5-4-3-2-1. 5 things you see, 4 things you feel, tactilely speaking, right? Engaging the senses. 3 things you hear, 2 things you smell, 1 thing you taste. When you're very, very anxious, just remember 5-4-3-2-1. And if you go, well, what order? I can't ever remember the order. Go with what's easiest. 5 things you taste. Right. Of course not. 1 thing you taste, 2 things you smell. You're not going to smell a bunch of things. The 3 and 4, the hear, the feel, you can mix those up. 5 things you see is the easiest. That's easy, I see the lamp. I see the phone. I see you. Like, it helps ground you with where you are, and it helps pull your mind out of the immediate anxiety. But it's coping. It doesn't solve it. If you are really struggling with anxiety, consider therapy. Consider talking to somebody. Work it through, things like that. Otherwise, these are some things we can do to kind of push through.
I like it. Wasn't quite 4 minutes, but
sorry.
We will pause that discussion there. We've got some other episodes that we've got lined up that are not necessarily in the mental health vein, but kind of along the self-esteem line we talked
similar.
about. And so, we'll save those discussions.
Some other things that kids are struggling with, we'll say that.
Yeah, and we'll leave it at that. It is the first day of college football. We're recording this today. Real quick, who's your champion pick? Who's going to win the national championship? I put you on the spot, so I'll go first. And then you, of course, I'm rooting for the Vols. I do not think the Vols are going to win the championship, the national championship, unfortunately. So I've got one pick that I think is going to win. I'm going to go with LSU.
Really?
I'm kind of rooting for USC, honestly. I would love Caleb Williams to get a championship. So I'm cheating. Those are my 2 picks: LSU and USC.
I followed my brother in this. I used to be a big USC fan. He was, and we had Lindale White from Chatfield.
They're good, man.
And I would not mind seeing USC. Of course, CU all the way. No, to be honest, Georgia's like a pro team, man. I mean, now they're Stetson Bennett, the 16th or whatever, whatever his name is. He's not there. We're going to see how they do, but they've stocked up like a pro team. So it's going to be tough. I mean, three-peating is really tough to do.
I just feel like it was boring to pick Georgia because that's probably the safe bet.
It's really boring. It is the safe bet. I'm going to pull for USC, though.
I like it.
I don't think they will, but I'm going to pull for them.
None of us are picking Alabama, so take
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Nick Saban. Yeah, no.
Exactly.
Can't stand the guy, but they're very, very talented. So, anyway.
We'll wrap right there. Yeah. This has been episode 36. We'll pick back up next week with another great discussion, but this has been episode 36 of the Godly Young Men podcast. Thanks for watching.